The supermarket sat on the outskirts of town, its sprawling parking lot empty except for a few scattered cars. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly as the night shift security guards made their rounds. Jake and Emily, two college students looking to make some extra cash, patrolled the aisles with a sense of unease gnawing at the edges of their minds. The rumors had been circulating for weeks. Strange happenings within the supermarket walls, whispered tales of disappearing employees and eerie sightings in the dead of night. But Jake and Emily brushed them off as the product of overactive imaginations. After all, they were just here to do a job. As they made their way through the empty aisles, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. But the aisles were deserted, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigeration units. Jake noticed Emily's unease and tried to reassure her. "It's probably just your imagination playing tricks on you," he said, his voice more to convince himself than her. But Emily wasn't so sure. There was something off about this place, something that made her skin crawl. She quickened her pace, eager to finish their rounds and get out of there as quickly as possible. As they reached the far end of the store, a sudden chill filled the air. Emily shivered, wrapping her arms around herself in a futile attempt to ward off the cold. Jake frowned, glancing around the empty aisles. "Did you feel that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, his gaze darting nervously from aisle to aisle. "Yeah, something doesn't feel right." Before either of them could react, a voice echoed through the empty store, a voice that sent shivers down their spines. "Welcome, guardians of the night," it said, its tone filled with malice. Jake and Emily spun around, their eyes wide with fear. Standing at the end of the aisle was a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Who are you?" Jake demanded, trying to keep the fear from his voice. The figure chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Emily's spine. "We are the guardians of this place," it said, its voice dripping with menace. "And you have trespassed on our domain." Jake and Emily exchanged a panicked glance, their minds racing with fear. They had heard the rumors, of course, but they had never believed them until now. "We didn't mean to trespass," Emily stammered, her voice trembling with fear. "We're just security guards." The figure cocked its head to the side, as though considering her words. "You have been chosen," it said, its voice cold and calculating. "Chosen to serve as our new guardians." Before Jake or Emily could protest, the figure raised its hand, and a blinding light filled the aisle. When they could see again, they found themselves standing in a vast, darkened chamber, surrounded by shadowy figures. "Welcome to your new home," the figure said, its voice echoing through the chamber. "You will serve us faithfully, or face the consequences." Terrified, Jake and Emily nodded, their minds reeling with fear and confusion. They had no choice but to obey. The guardians of the aisles had claimed them as their own. And as they stood in the darkness, they knew that they would never escape the horrors that awaited them in the depths of the supermarket.
The old supermarket stood at the edge of town, its faded sign swinging gently in the wind, casting eerie shadows over the deserted parking lot. Rumors whispered through the community about strange occurrences within its walls, but most dismissed them as the product of overactive imaginations. However, for Sarah, a single mother in desperate need of groceries, the supermarket was her only option. As she pushed her squeaky shopping cart through the automatic doors, a chill ran down her spine. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly glow on the barren aisles. She shivered, feeling as though unseen eyes were watching her every move. Ignoring her unease, Sarah grabbed a list from her purse and began to navigate the aisles. But with each step, the feeling of being watched intensified. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, lurking in the shadows. As she reached the canned goods aisle, a strange sound echoed through the empty store. It was a low, guttural growl, like a wild animal stalking its prey. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She strained her ears, listening for any sign of movement. Just as she was about to dismiss the sound as her imagination, she heard it again, louder this time, and closer. Panic seized her as she fumbled for her phone, ready to dial 911 at a moment's notice. But before she could make the call, something brushed against her leg. Sarah screamed, dropping her phone as she spun around to confront her unseen attacker. But there was nothing there, just empty aisles stretching out in every direction. Trembling, Sarah retrieved her phone and continued down the aisle, her nerves on edge. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, but deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong. As she rounded the corner, she came face to face with a sight that made her blood run cold. Standing in the center of the aisle was a figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Sarah gasped, unable to tear her gaze away from the horrifying sight. The figure took a step towards her, its movements slow and deliberate. Sarah stumbled backwards, her heart racing with terror. She wanted to run, to flee from this nightmare, but her legs refused to move. Suddenly, the figure spoke, a voice like gravel scraping against stone. "Why have you come here, mortal?" it hissed, its words sending shivers down Sarah's spine. I just needed groceries," Sarah stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure cocked its head to the side, as though considering her response. "You have trespassed in a place not meant for the living," it said, its voice filled with malice. "Now you must pay the price." With a wave of its hand, the figure summoned forth a horde of twisted, nightmarish creatures. They slithered and slunk toward Sarah, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Terrified, Sarah turned and fled, her screams echoing through the empty store. She dashed down aisle after aisle, the creatures hot on her heels. She could feel their fetid breath on the back of her neck, their clawed hands reaching out to grab her. But just as she reached the exit, a blinding light filled the room. Sarah shielded her eyes, expecting the worst. But when she dared to look again, she saw a figure standing in the doorway, a figure bathed in a golden glow. "Come with me if you want to live," the figure said, extending a hand toward Sarah. Without hesitation, Sarah took the figure's hand, feeling a surge of warmth and safety wash over her. Together, they fled the supermarket, leaving the horrors behind them. As they emerged into the sunlight, Sarah turned to thank her rescuer. But to her surprise, there was no one there, just an empty parking lot stretching out before her. Shaken but alive, Sarah vowed never to return to that accursed supermarket again. And though she tried to convince herself that it was all just a bad dream, she couldn't shake the feeling that the horrors she had encountered were all too real.